Welcome back to the Successful Survivors Podcast. We are successful survivors of childhood trauma. This is for you. If you are a survivor of trauma, we're here for you. We are your tribe. This is a safe spot to be in, and we'd love to hear from you. Today, Amber Jewel, LMSW, is going to lead us in a really important talk, and it's something that we've all dealt with. And I mean like universally, all of us who have experienced childhood trauma, things that happened when we were too little and too vulnerable to prevent them or to put them into context and perspective and try to understand them. We've all dealt with that and the fallout from that. And a lot of us deal with the fallout from that for a long time. So it's a really important topic. So Amber, take it away, girl.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to lead today because this is a topic that plays close to my heart in my clinic when I work in the mental health areas. But I want to bring up, before I even mention the topic, something that sparked me when I was thinking about speaking of this with you guys that I think we all can relate to. Did you know, gals, that it was National Daughters Day, National Sons Day this last week?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So we see it on Rhonda in social media. It was coming across, and people were sharing all these beautiful pictures of their daughters and their sons, and just so proud of them. Myself as a parent, I was like, okay, I'm going to put this on here. And then I was thinking how I kind of felt some sadness too with it. And when I think about what we were going to talk about this week and how much it can relate to successful survivors, that maybe how many of us didn't get that about us. Or when we come up to these type of holidays or celebrations where we see the stereotypical family photos or celebrations of our loved ones, that we kind of go through a grief in that moment when we see everybody sharing about everybody else but don't have one. And so it really put on my heart that we need to be more conversational about what depression is, what anxiety is, what grief is, especially when it relates to trauma, and how often we experience that even well into our adulthood from simple things like a social media event where everybody's sharing these beautiful pictures of families and we don't have one, or our parents don't put it up. And that's what made me think, okay, I'm glad we're doing this topic because it still relates to me as an adult. Anybody else an adult that thinks they could relate to seeing stuff like that and it can hurt?
Yeah. Absolutely. And social media is just, it's so polarizing. It's just in your face. And then especially if you're going through anything kind of like any hard times at all, depression, anxiety, maybe you're a kid, maybe you're an adult, doesn't matter. But then you're looking on social media and you're seeing, oh my gosh, they just went to Hawaii. Oh my gosh, they have no problems. Look how much fun they're having. Look at Johnny and Mary are over there jumping off the cliff and swimming with dolphins. And here I'm over here just trying to get a meal, or I'm over here because my dad, who's an alcoholic, is going to come home from work in the morning and he's going to beat me because I didn't do something right. There's like you just kind of social media. And I know I just kind of didn't mean to steal your thunder, girl, but I thought about that in that moment because it flashed on the screen about how I've seen, and I just put up my own post about my kids, from when they were little until now. And, the lifetime of memories come flooding in. But yeah, it's social media. It's polarizing.
Okay, but I have to jump in and say something too. A lot of that is what people want you to see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many perfect families can we name? I don't know anybody who has a perfect family, right? There's always something. And, people don't always share all their stuff on social media. So, you see these beautiful pictures of the perfect family and, everything's great. And in the meantime, people have struggles. Life is hard. but social media plays into that fantasy that we tend to all have about we're the only one that has this horrific situation and everybody else's life is perfect. And I mean, I always thought when I was growing up, I thought if you had a mom and you had a dad and you lived in a house, you had it made. Like, what problem could you possibly have if you had a mom and a dad in a house? Because I didn't have a mom, I didn't have a dad, and I didn't have a house for part of it, right? So I thought everybody who had that played Monopoly every night, and they drank hot chocolate, and they all like laughed and, you know, giggled, and it was all fun. And everybody on earth had that except for me. What a fantasy, right?
Yeah. Well, and actually, I'm glad you spoke in, and that's what I want to do in this conversation today, because you both made really, really great points that I think it's important for our listeners to hear. First of all, Diana, you popped in because I felt like you had some anger and some emotions, or at least a feeling in response to seeing that and thinking, oh man, I don't relate, or this doesn't include me. And I have to wonder, why do we not post our feelings sometimes in maybe a social media or talking to somebody about, oh, you know, it does kind of suck that it's a Father's Day and I don't connect to that, or Mother's Day, or as holidays are coming in, the season of holidays. Why do we feel like we can't express that or have that? Do you have a safe person you can give that to? And then Rhonda, whenever you're talking about relating to your perspective of it, it's also important we educate people. It's important we share these stories, and that every survivor shares their stories, that there's something different out there, and that it's okay to not fit what everybody thinks it should be, especially, again, and this is why this is important for us with the holidays right around the corner, because we start getting into those stereotypes that it should be. And we stay silent a lot of times when we have a lot to say that can help us and help others during this season.
You know, it's funny. I think we don't always, like I won't always go to I've seen people complain on social media, and that makes me crazy. So it's so funny. It's like when I see someone complaining and being negative, it's like, stop whining. Like my initial thing is, stop whining. You're fine. Go to, you know, me and Rhonda talk about this all the time. Okay, listen, give yourself 15 minutes, call it a day. Boom, let's move on. Like, you just got to do your thing. But in that being said, that mindset, I guess, if you're going to put something on about you're having a bad day or something like that, in my head, make it maybe helpful or asking for someone else. Hey, has somebody else run into this? I am struggling today. Does anybody have anything? Like, if it was presented like that way, I think people would feel more comfortable sharing. I know I would feel more comfortable sharing if it was like that. I just never want it. I guess I don't want to make anybody feel bad ever. So if they're coming across my page, oh gosh, there's Diana, she's complaining again. Or there's, you know, I don't want it to be too fluffy, and I don't want it to be too negative. So it's just, it's an image thing, because
challenging.
That's what it is, right? It's the whole thing. So that balance of, okay, listen, I'm struggling today, but how do I want to address this? Because I do want to ask for help. And I have done that on social media. Hey guys, I am just having a really bad day. Has anybody else dealt with blah, 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 or whatever? And I have done it before. I don't do it that often, but I should do it a little bit more. I think it's relatable.
Well, and I love how you said from social media that you don't take maybe the big feelings back to social media, but social media can trigger it. And that's why in America today, the levels of depression, just recent research said that teens who struggle with depression, anxiety are higher than even though we have all these interventions in place, are still extremely high, above record numbers in suicidality and thoughts of suicide. And of course, I think those of us who are successful survivors have a higher probability of dealing with that. And so it's important to remember to be aware of it, but that you don't have to take it back to social media to talk about it. Maybe you take it to a friend or a group or something like that. And I know one of you is going to have some ideas that talks with people in hard times at the very beginning of their adventures. So I'm going to want your insight on that. But let me tell you a little bit really, really quick of what I'm talking about with the mental health part of it. So 3.8% of the American population, that's about 280 million people in the world, in America alone, struggle with mental illness of depression. So you can have sadness and be down a lot, but this is talking about depression. That is feeling tearful, empty, sad, not having hope, lack of interest. Sometimes, particularly in the male gender, we will see it more come out as anger. But then on top of that, this is the season of grief. And they do say that grief can be just as challenging, if not more challenging, the second year of enduring grief. The first year, sometimes we're just doing what we can and our mind hasn't released the emotional effects of it. And so there's some denial and loss. And then the shame and guilt that we can carry through the things. And then one other real thing, not that everybody's real into data like me, but one other thing I want to mention through the Psychiatric Times said that there is a link that has been identified between childhood trauma and adult depression. 62.5% of those who experience particularly a childhood trauma also struggle with adult depression. Now, there's a lot of factors there. That could be the factors of the genetics, that can be personalities, that could be injuries, but it's also like neurological chemistry. But life events, the stressors of life events affect the hormones so much that it certainly can affect us as adults. So it's important to just understand that it's really a lot more normal, I think, to struggle with this in our population that we're talking about, the people who've been through hard times, than maybe we say, even as adults. Because aren't we supposed to, Rhonda, turn 18 and get over it?
Oh, sorry that I just blurted out a big yeah.
Yeah.
Amber, I'm so glad that you brought that up. And Lee, I just wanted to just say as an aside, stop talking all the time.
I know. Stop interrupting.
One word.
Well, Lee is the one I was mentioning until we get to her, that she sees people in that big transition where there might be intense depression, intense anxiety, and just emotional sadness of the moment. So I want you to talk about that in just a minute when Rhonda's done.
Yeah. No, Lee, I know you have a really good perspective of all this stuff, a 360 perspective. But I just wanted to say, Amber, I'm so glad that you mentioned about the statistics and so on. And I wanted to also throw out, and I don't know the statistics, and you probably do, that adult victims of childhood trauma have a higher rate of heart disease, pulmonary problems,
yes,
all kinds of physical stuff. And I think that it's worth mentioning because not everybody understands it. And even though, Diana, you had made the point, you and I are from that same kind of, shake it off and, let's get over it kind of thing. And I do that just because I'm not going to give my abusers one more minute of my time and my peace and my joy. But with that said, I also have to acknowledge that, I find myself part of that statistic. I no longer suffer from depression, but I deal with heart issues, I deal with lung issues, and I know it goes back to, my heart was broken when I was a little kid. I was raised by people who each smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And the whole issue of when you're a scared little kid, you hold your breath a lot. So you take these shallow breaths, and so there's not a lot of deep breathing going on, and which means there's not a lot of oxygen getting to the brain. My medical degree came from Google, so take this for whatever it's worth. But the point is, when you go to the ER, what's the first thing they do? They put oxygen in your nose and they hook you up to an IV and they start to hydrate you. So I think, okay, well, duh, I can drink water and I can breathe. And I think, that's what we all should be doing, because survivors of childhood trauma, I think we need to be extra aware and in terms of taking care of ourselves and making sure we're getting enough oxygen and getting enough hydration. So anyway, I don't know, Amber, if you wanted to talk more about the whole.
See, that's interesting you say that. When it physically, once you're abused, once you are hurt, once you are traumatized, it physically manifests itself in your body. If you do not deal with that, eventually it turns to disease in some way or another. And while we have all dealt with our stuff along the way, there's still something to be said for really, really digging and finding. And then it could get so granular, like the chemical imbalance caused by, anxiety or depression, or, when I turned to alcohol back in the day, and I mean, by no means was I an alcoholic, but that was my coping mechanism. And so I would binge. And then I was talking to Ryan about this today, because I said, gosh, we're having our topic today. And as I'm talking to him, I'm telling him, in my brain, I'm not identifying exactly anxiety, depression, and grief and sadness. And he made a really good point. He said, Mom, you came from such hard places over here where you were always that way. And now you live a life where it's a calm environment. You don't, if the door slams, it's because the window, like if there was an ocean breeze here, and it slammed it shut. Mm-hmm. But I don't have to panic anymore like I used to. He says, so everything is relative. I still have anxiety. I still get triggered, which I hate that word, but I still get that. And I'm still depressed in some ways here and there, like my business is slow, or, maybe I don't feel good enough, or blah, blah, whatever. My desk is a mess or whatever, I still have all of these things that I deal with, and it's all relative. So however that gets managed, and I jump in, I get all excited. I get excited to say words. So
I love that you're acknowledging it. I mean, really, that's the first step anyway. If no matter what the label is, which that's important for us, maybe in the mental health field or the medical field, but for us to decipher, knowing some of the symptoms is important, but just understanding ourselves and understanding how we feel and realizing we can and should feel better. If we're feeling down, that's the most important thing. And that's what I hear you saying is you're acknowledging, I deserve to feel better. I deserve to feel different with this. And so learning about it, exploring it, Googling it, talking to somebody, figuring out what those things are, looking in your family history, if you can find that and see if there's common denominators there, and then talking to somebody. But I know the situation you have, Leah, is a little different because you see people right when they come in as your service, but then also your personal experience. So what are your thoughts when we talk about, it could be, I don't like to necessarily call it mental illness, but any of these characteristics that could be mental illness or just heavy feelings is what I call them a lot of times.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this a little bit. I want to back the train up a second and talk into what Diana was saying in regards to, I think, perspective of what you're upset about or hurting over is the biggest piece to understanding how to move forward. So I'm a huge Husker fan. I live in the land of Lincoln, and so I'm a huge Husker fan. And I'm not going to lie, I've spent the last 20 years in a chronic depression because my football team can't win, right? And it seems kind of crazy. But here's my point. When I was a little girl growing up, I grew up in the time before there were such a thing as an open adoption. And so I only knew very little bits and pieces of my life. And one of the things I knew was that I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. So, and like so many of those who will see this podcast, and other adopted, people, there's always kind of a nagging, I don't really fit I don't really belong. There's just, it doesn't stop you from forming relationships and bonding, but it's always just kind of this little nagging thing in the back of your head. And so I needed a family. And I love football. I started watching football when I was like 11 years old. So the Huskers became my family. I am more emotionally tied to them than I probably am anything else from my childhood. And so we went through fantastic years. I mean, from the late 70s through the early 90s, we were unstoppable. And since mid 90s on, we haven't had very many winning seasons, let alone a winning football team. So it's okay to be depressed about that. It's okay to have big emotions about that. But in perspective, a lot of what some of the people that will be tuning in and seeing this podcast may be dealing with is life altering events. And that's much different than having a bad football team, right? And so I think it's really important that you understand how big is this event that's dragging you down, because there's different ways. For me, getting over a Husker football loss looks much different than for our little ones who are coming in, or our teens who are coming in through the Haven, who've just been ripped away from everything they know. And it doesn't matter the circumstances of why they came to our service, but they're there. And so how do we help them manage those emotions in the moment? And I can tell you, the biggest thing that I have learned in this journey has been that if we're meeting the physical needs of those we're caring for, that will lessen the long-term effect moving forward, because we're taking them out of that survival mode and we're putting them in a place where they've been seen, they're heard, their needs are met. So when I tell them it's going to be okay, we don't have all the answers. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But what I do know is that what you need to be able to move in tomorrow has been met and taken care of. And so I think perspective, and Rhonda was, you used the word when you're talking about Rhonda's sharing earlier. That was the word that kept coming to my mind as well. Perspective is everything when it comes to dealing with this. And one of the reasons we see so many people fall into that deep depression, deep anxiety, is because they've lost perspective. And it's so important for those who have that life experience to come alongside to be able to give them perspective of how to help them move forward. I'm not a big social media fan, and I saw the same things that you guys saw with, daughters and sons, and next it'll be, rats or something. I don't know. And I'm not a big fan of any of that stuff. A lot of it has to do with my history and my background. I don't feel always that I have family. I have family now, but to your point earlier, Amber, that I don't have anybody posting things saying, "Ooh, you did a great job," or "This is my beautiful daughter," or whatever. And I'm 57 years old, so I'm still oftentimes feeling like I am this in a life raft in the middle of the ocean, just clinging some days. One of the things, it was very interesting that this was the topic, because one of the things I am also learning in this journey, and I'm hoping that this will be something that will resonate with those who are listening, is how important self-talk is. And how this played out in my life recently is I had been nominated and was chosen as a finalist for a local award. And the day came when we were to go to that luncheon, And I'm probably going to cry now. I both my knees are not working well right now. And, so somebody took me so I wouldn't have to walk as far. And, I literally sat in that car for probably 20 to 30 minutes just trying to get up the courage to go in the door because I'm watching all the people who I believe fit in and look like they belong and should receive that kind of recognition. And then I tried to slink my way in and I got in and then I won. And that was really hard. I sat there for a long time. Like they didn't just call my name, right? And then I had to go up in front of everybody. And because I've spent so much time in negative talk land, I couldn't fully appreciate or embrace the recognition. And so I want people who are listening to this today to look at how your self-talk is, because you don't often get a second chance at things that really can become a springboard into something more beautiful, something bigger or better than yourself. And so I don't know who needs to hear that, but that's what was kind of placed on my heart. Amber, I'm sorry if that's not what you were wanting me to get at, but that was really what was placed on my heart as we talk about this. I mean, that's a very recent experience for me, and you can tell I'm still struggling with it, but
it's beautiful. That was the perfect thing. And I know for the listeners, they'll feel that too, because it's relatable. We get you in that. And I love, there was a couple of things you said in that too, is you said, I didn't feel that way. And what you're saying in that is you're saying that you can change. You're not saying I don't feel like I'm valuable. In that moment, I didn't feel like I deserved it. But you're giving yourself the opportunity to convince yourself of the truth, and that is that you do deserve it, that you are worth it. So you're saying at that moment I didn't, but I'm capable of. And that's a really powerful way you said that. And I don't know that you realized it, but I hope listeners take note of that. And I know I do, that sometimes we may not feel like we're worthy right then, or that we're good enough, or we might struggle with mental illness. I mean, anxiety is a real deal for me. And we say in the moment, I can't, but remember it's right now or in this moment, but I can. And that is the power of perspective, is what you just did in that. And the other thing is you were being vulnerable. You're being real with the struggle is real, I think, for many, if not maybe all of us that have survived challenges, and talking about the ACEs that you mentioned, Rhonda, adverse childhood experiences during our childhood, is talking about those medical issues that science has said has a secondary effect. And so there's a part of our body that is our mind that's going to be affected by that too. And that's what you're talking about. And so accepting that and not giving up to it is the difference there. I think that's very powerful and beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. And from your crowd of supporters, congratulations to you.
That's right.
On that award.
Congratulations.
We are very, very proud of you, Lee. And even if you might have not thought in the moment that you deserved it, we all know you deserve it. We all know what you've done.
Yes.
And that's actually beautiful, Rhonda, that you just said that, because one of the things I wanted to make sure we got on today before we go is advice or tips to manage maybe when we're feeling down or grief. I'm kind of a different theorist, that I think grief is a lifelong experience. I think we all struggle with grief from the first time of a loss as a child. And those of us with trauma, that can be very early and a lot of grief. So dealing with that. But I want to talk about the tips to managing, some tips, some advice. And so one that I want to give real quick that you actually made me think of, Leah, when you were saying that, is, did you know that for every negative that we say, we are to do 3 positives to reinforce that negative thought. However, those of us who have experienced trying times or trauma are actually supposed to have between 7 to 10 positive affirmations for every negative.
Wow.
So we can't compliment ourselves enough. My challenge is sometimes to write it down or say it to myself. You worked really hard on that. Not just compliments like you look really good today. That's great, but I might not tomorrow. How about you put a lot of effort into what you do and that's meaningful? I really enjoy your character. You worked really hard on this. You put the effort into it. You did not cuss at that person who ticked you off. That's a compliment. And giving ourselves that, writing it down, or if you know somebody who's struggling, giving them some compliments, even in spite of a challenge, reinforcing that they can make it through. So that's the one tip you made me think of that I want us to always include is giving that reinforcement of this was tough, but I'm going to give you some reinforcement of the positive aspect. How about you, ladies? Whoever wants to start sharing a couple tips that would help manage those heavy emotions, those big emotions, maybe the down days.
I'll go.
Rhonda, go for it.
Okay, so number 1, it's temporary.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you're feeling right now, feelings are fickle. You might feel something different, completely different 10 minutes from now. One phone call can change everything. You can get a phone call that says, hey, that job you applied for, you got it. That scholarship, you got it. Hey, come shopping with, come go to lunch with me. Come go to, poke around the mall with me, whatever. One thing can happen that changes the way you feel. A winning Husker game, Lee. America, right? So whatever it is for you, whatever you're feeling, those big overwhelming feelings, they're temporary. Look at it that way. Number 2, you have the power. You have the power to decide what you're going to think and what you're going to feel and what you're going to do and how you're going to behave and what you're going to say. You have the power to do that. You might not feel like you do, but I'm telling you, I'm old. I've figured this out. I know that I took hold of the power, and you can do it too. And the way I did it, you might have a different way that you figure it out, but for me, it's like changing the channel on a TV. If I'm having a thought, it can be triggered by a song on the radio. It can be triggered by a smell. It can be triggered by, I'm in a grocery store and I see a lady who looks like somebody who hurt me or whatever. It can be whatever. And you just instantly go there. You can instantly go someplace else. You can change that thought. You don't have to keep thinking that. So those are my 3 things. What do you think, Lee?
Well, when you were just talking about thoughts, there's scripture in the Bible that talks about taking every thought captive. And I think it's really important that we do get intentional about what are we thinking about? It's natural to do that, when we're watching the wrong TV or programs, or we're listening to the wrong kinds of, influences that go against us as our core values, so it's very individual. But so I think that's really important. I think it's really important that you reach out, even if you can't have a conversation, just sending a text saying, hey, I'm struggling, to somebody else that you can trust to give you good advice. And I think I would limit myself. I would limit who all I'm going to broadcast to that I'm having a bad day, because there will be people who will prey on your bad day, and they will try to make it worse. And so I think it's important that you surround yourself with people that you can trust, and even in that group, maybe keep it. Maybe there's a particular thing one of your other friends has gone through. Reach out to that particular friend. I come from the old school of you put one foot in front of the other. You don't sit around and feel sorry for yourself a lot. And the negative side to that is that you don't always embrace what you're feeling. And so I would encourage people to embrace what emotions they're having. And that's both good and bad. I mean, getting a new job can be just as anxiety producing as hearing you didn't get the job, right? I mean, that award was probably the most anxious I've ever felt. I've never had trouble getting out of a vehicle before. So it doesn't always have to be a negative thing that can throw you into a tailspin. But if you can identify it, and to Rhonda's point, recognize that it is in the moment, it's a temporary, and then figure out how you're going to put your next foot in front of the other to walk through it. I mean, everybody that's listening to this podcast has probably heard something very similar. So you're not getting any, Einstein wisdom here. But I hope that as you're listening, what you are hearing is that there's 4 women here who really have walked tough roads to get to where we're at. And there's nothing that's that special or unique about us. It's not like, oh, well, I could never do that. Every single one of us can get there. We're equipped to get there. But our supporting cast really has to help us by stepping up to the plate when we can't do it ourselves. That's where our supporting cast comes in and helps us walk through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Diana.
I was just listening to everything everybody's saying. I'm just going, yep. All those things. Yep, Lee. And I want to say, Lee, you did embrace the feelings. You sat there for 20 minutes in the car and you embraced the feelings before you strapped yourself up and walked into that room to accept the award. You did. So you are embracing them. And I do the same thing over here. It's almost like, I think, with that little girl inside, like if it's my first language. A pastor used to tell me that a long time ago when I was going to him for counseling, and he would say, when you're dealing with a difficult situation or you're confronted with someone who isn't very kind, your first reaction is called your first language. And that's that initial reaction. And you're not thinking before you're speaking, so you might blurt. And so in order to learn different coping skills, that's your second language. Well, sometimes when you're confronted with these things right away, anxiety, depression, an immediate loss or disappointment or betrayal or something that's happened directly to you, or you're taking it on, you immediately could go to that first language. So I've done it a million times, and it's taken me a really long time, and I'm still very, very guilty of thinking in that first language before I kind of go, hold on a second. What are my main coping skills anytime I'm sad or upset or feel, like I'm not good enough or whatever? Again, I go to funny. I'm like, okay, you know what? I got to take a beat. It's time for me to put something on that's funny. It's time to laugh. It's time to walk outside with my dog, sit there with this cute little face, and she just loves me to death. And, it puts you have to heal your heart or heal your mindset and get your mental right in that moment. And at least once I do that, I can look back at whatever my issue is and then take steps to move forward. And that's typically what I do for my thing. But
and I love how you said steps too.
It is. There's steps. Steps. It isn't just like a one size fits all type of situation all the time. And it's funny, when I was talking to Ryan earlier today, I was asking him, I was talking about this, and I'm like, I just feel like I'm not connecting just yet. And he says, well, first of all, the bottom line is you don't have a plan. There's not a plan. You don't have a plan. He goes, we are one brain. Me and Ryan are like the same brain. He's like, we don't have a plan. We just do. And the first thing we do is, okay, you know what? Hold on. Let me move over here for a second. Let me get something funny. We got to wash the brain for a second and then start fresh and then revisit. And now your mindset is not the same as it was when that problem was first given to you or whatever. So that's what's helpful for me.
Awesome. And I think all of those are excellent and of great value. Yeah, they may not be from a textbook thing, but who actually remembers those anyway? Just got to ask. So those are beautiful, and they're very powerful because they really do work. I'm going to mimic a couple of them. I actually, if this shows, I'm not sure. I have a book with me. It's called Wake Up Laughing.
Ooh,
And Diana, it's what you were just talking about. It's a offbeat devotions for unconventional women.
Nice.
And so it's a joke every day. And humor, when appropriate, is science-based. And it's just easy and healthy. I'm going to flash that again. Wake Up Laughing is just a little small book. And it revives us. Humor is a beautiful coping skill. There's also a classic thing we can hear of is writing down something we're grateful for every morning. It's just a mindset change in the morning can be really powerful. Making sure that we understand and aware of our emotions, but understand that our emotions are correct to us, but it doesn't mean that it's correct of the situation. You know, we have the right to our emotions, but it doesn't mean that our emotions define the situation. And so the word you said earlier of capturing your emotions, being aware of how you can manage those. I think it's interesting in the Bible, when you read the Bible, you don't read a lot of emotions necessarily. You read truths, right? He has emotions, but he managed those and spoke through truth. And so being able to be aware of what your emotion is, labeling it, and then deciding if you're going to lean into or against that emotion, because we have emotions. Now, I'm going to say one thing real quick, ladies, that I will say a disadvantage for listeners is we don't have a man on our group right now today. And so I just want to mention that if you experience anger as your one emotion, explore if there's maybe another emotion behind that. And learning to just simply put words to that emotion can allow you to take that power back the emotion takes from you. Because a lot of times we do have anger, but there's often emotion behind the anger that we just don't know how to label. And so like Lee was saying earlier, is make sure you have a connection, somebody you can talk to about that. One of you mentioned taking some time. Oh, it was Lee. You were saying that sometimes what I advise people is, set 20, 30 minutes out where you cry, you get mad, you sit in the pity bottom box, whatever you want to call it, and laugh about not calling it the right name. And then you get up and you leave it. And so with kids, sometimes I have them write it in a box and they can come back to the box later, but they get to physically and mentally leave it there so that they can make it back through the day. Sometimes that works really well in processing grief as well. So there's just a lot of different things that we can do. I will mention there are situations where maybe these tips aren't enough and somebody feels unsafe or want to harm themselves or somebody else. And we want to acknowledge that that's a real deal as well. And when we talk about mental illness and the presence of those things that's beyond our control, making sure that you seek out a resource like a suicide hotline, a 988 national number, contacting a friend, calling the police, anything like that to support you, because you are valuable. And we all have that worth and dignity that Diana and Rhonda were talking about. So I just wanted to mention a few of those and reiterate some of the awesome things you're integrating into your lives. And you probably don't even know that these ladies do this day to day and these coping skills day to day that they don't even think about. It just becomes natural the more you practice it. Getting out in the sunlight is also beautiful, except for those of you who are in rainy states that I don't know if it rains all the time. I hear that they use lights fixtures for it, but I don't know, Rhonda, in Where you're at, I assume you have sun all the time, right?
We have all the sun. Yeah. We're
There
using
you
it
go.
all up. I wanted to add something to what you said, Amber, about, getting help. I think you need to do a little plug advertisement for how people can contact you, because I know that in your home state, you do individual and group and whatever kind of therapy, but then also nationally, you can do coaching and communications coaching and all kinds of things that are really helpful. So why don't you give everybody your website or how to contact you?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I work with a lot of people, particularly those who've experienced trauma or have some type of anxiety or stressors in their lives. And so my website, Amber Jewell, JEWELL.org. You can contact me. It has an email, address, number, all that stuff on there. I also have my email, amber.jewell, JEWELL 777 at Gmail. And so it's just a great resource because sometimes we need a sounding board, a safe place. And again, she said it a minute ago that you want to have somebody you can trust. If you feel like there's not somebody you can trust, finding somebody you can trust temporarily to help you develop relationships where you can trust, because that can be an underlying deal too of that trust. Once your safety is set, you're able to work with that. So I'd be glad to provide support or just finding connections in your area that if that's needed, we can do that too. So, all right. Rhonda, you look like you were going to say something. So I'm going to let you go first, and just like a 1-sentence statement or tip to people who you would want to leave with this before we go. And then Rhonda, whatever you had as well.
Yeah, because, I can't just limit it to my one little statement. I was thinking about what you said, Amber, and I thought, okay, I remember when I was younger and somebody said, you should see a therapist. And I'm like, oh, therapist. Okay. I can't tell you the number of people who had all the right initials after their names who I went and saw and it didn't work for me. And I'm just going to tell you the truth. I worked with mental health professionals for 35 years, and I have come to the conclusion that a lot of them are kookier than I am. And so I found myself not saying,
oh my God,
okay, go find a therapist, go talk to somebody, and then leaving it at that. I can't, I'm sorry. I cannot leave it at that, because I did have some of those experiences where the therapist is telling me their whole life story and I'm sitting there paying for that.
No.
Or the therapist got angry with me because I didn't vote the way she voted. And the therapist who, and on it goes. So when I say, contact Amber, I'm saying,
contact
Amber. Contact Amber. But seriously, like if you go get some help and you talk to a pastor or a therapist or whoever, and it doesn't work out for you, please don't stop. Please don't just go, well, they're all like that and I'm not going to try anybody else. Keep talking, keep trying to find somebody that you click with, that seems to share your values. I think that's a very big thing. And I think there are lists of, for me, I'm a Christian, and I think there are lists of Christian therapists somewhere online that you could probably find. If they are, where you can go, actually physically sit there. So that's my one thing. And just, to just join Successful Survivors. I mean, it doesn't cost anything to join, but you can go to successfulsurvivors.org, click on the join, put your name and email in there, and join us on social media. Join the conversation. Come and join us on the podcast. I think the more that we own our stories, the better able we are to mine the good things out of them, because the reality is that we are more resilient and more resourceful and stronger and more courageous, and I could go on, than the average person. But it starts with being congruent and owning what happened to us, what we did, how we responded to it. A lot of us, I think, don't want to talk about it, and we, don't want anybody else to talk about it because there's, whatever it is, guilt, shame, fear, whatever. The minute we own it, we take back the power. That's my last thing I'm going to say.
I love that. All right. Diana, let's go with you next.
I don't even want to follow that. It's just painful to put me behind Rhonda. She already did all the things. She already said all the things I would say. I really have nothing to add. I honestly don't. I don't want to say anything.
Not true, Diana. You will always talk about fitness, and I will never talk about fitness. So you have a whole
I'll do the fitness talk. I'll do the fitness talk. Although I feel very guilty because lately I have not been doing my fitness. That's probably why I've been feeling so tired. So I will say this: get out in the sun. If there is no sun, put a raincoat on your head, walk around the block for 10 minutes. The 10 minutes alone will make all the difference in the world. If you were just crying your eyes out, or if you had an argument with someone, or you didn't get along with someone at work or whatever, take a break, walk outside, 10 minutes, you come back, your perspective is a lot different. You can breathe through it and you can think through. And then that's when you say the positive things to yourself. Like Amber was talking about positive affirmations. It's funny because in sales, it is all affirmations. I am going to make 10 sales today. I am going to make $100,000 this month, whatever. You don't, all these crazy, they say these positive affirmations, but at the end of the day, it's a fact. You wake up in the morning, you say something that you appreciate about yourself, about your life, about your day that you're going to have. And you from there will put yourself in a great frame of mind moving forward.
Absolutely. Definitely. Thank you. Love that. Yeah. I feel super excited when I'm done exercising, but
I don't love going in. Trust me. I don't it's kicking and screaming to go in, but I know the result. I'm going to feel good when I leave.
All right, gal, we got you.
I think I need a booster seat or something. That's what I think. I'm sitting here looking at the screen. No matter how I sit, I'm like 4 inches. I'm not really this small in real life, people. I think that the one thing I want to make sure that we communicate with those who will watch and listen is that we're all speaking from our personal experiences, things that have helped us individually. There's some generalities, and Amber has spoken to those very well. If I had a generality to share, it would be find yourself some support. Don't expect it to be your husband or your wife, your significant other. Don't expect it to be your kids. Find somebody, though, that you can have really honest conversations with and know that they will cherish that the gift that you're giving them to help you walk through it and not use it against you. But what I see over and over and over in the role that I play here in the foster care system in Nebraska is that we see multi-generational foster youth because no one has gotten the encouraging support to break the cycle. And so I have come to learn and understand how critical a role that plays in moving in a successful direction. And so if you don't know where to start, if you're like, oh, it is raining and I don't have a raincoat, so I can't walk outside for 10 minutes. First of all, that's a lame excuse, but let's say that's where you're at. Start thinking about, even if as you're sitting there in your room, think about who can be my support. And it will feel awkward because in order for it to work, it's going to have to be somebody who's not in the same mud hole with you, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to have to be able to pick you up out of that mud hole. So that means there's going to be more than likely a sense of inadequacy on your part. You don't deserve that kind of friend, or you don't know how to be a friend to somebody who you think is doing better than you are. But honestly, that is so key to the ongoing success of staying out of the mud hole. So that's what I just want people to know. Your experience is going to be different in a lot of ways, and yet the emotions that we feel can still be very similar.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
And if
I think that's
a booster seat, you can contact us here at the Foster Care Closet.
See, you're integrating the humor beautifully.
Oh, that's awesome.
See, and I think that's a great way to do it, because you're using humor, and we do have the power of perspective, like you ladies were saying, of changing the way we see things, because there is a strength in being smaller than other people, I'm just going to say, and showing faults on recordings of things, because, well, all of us do in the end. There's just some of us who admit it and some of us who don't. And so it's important to remember our uniqueness. And I think that summarizes my perspective. And my final thought is, what I often think of as life is tough, because we're going to have challenging experiences. We all do at every age. Life is not easy. Life is tough, but we are tough too. You are tough too, each of us, and anybody listening. And it's just choosing those skills and those advantages that we have to equip us to be even more tough during that adventure we have going on, and persevering through it, so we can continue doing that. So on that, continue listening to the next show that we have, and the successful survivors contacting us with questions, and continue being the awesome people you were created to be.
Thank you, Amber. You did awesome.
Great. See you next time.